Welcome to Cactus Crossfire, your go-to for hot takes and prickly debates.
Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Cactus Crossfire. I'm one of your hosts, S2E10. Unfortunately for you guys today, we don't get to have our partner in crime, Eddie Ableser. He got tied up, but we do have a very special guest. The only guest that's ever been on this show that's actually also been in Jon Stewart's show. But we're happy to have her here with us. Our former Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, a candidate for governor. Great to see you. How are you?
Nice to see you too, Sisto. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so happy that you made time for us. I know that you've had a busy morning, as you were saying earlier, and you're out campaigning for governor here in New Mexico. And you and I have actually known each other for a number of years.
Mhm.
I had left president of Young Democrats, and you came in as chair of the party. But we actually got to know each other through OFA.
Yes. Organizing, lots of organizing during the two Obama campaigns. So that was fun.
Everybody always talked about how you were the best at getting folks to volunteer and getting them involved. What was your secret to doing that, getting people engaged, young people especially, to help get involved in the process?
Yeah, so you might know that I did a lot of work in Indian country, right? Going to all the Pueblo feast days, registering voters, went to every Navajo Nation chapter in New Mexico and the Apache nations. And quite frankly, I cooked a lot of pots of green chili stew, baked a lot of bread. If you provide food for people, they come out.
Yeah.
When I was working on the Obama campaign in 2012, I opened an office in Gallup, and people would come into the office to eat, and then I would get them to sit down and make phone calls. So, sometimes if you have food, that's the language of New Mexico, isn't it?
Well, it's your language for sure, because I mean, you're a very accomplished culinary skills of New Mexico food. You had your own salsa company. You were also a baker at one time. So, all of those things kind of lead into a little bit of you. And plus, you're affectionately known as Auntie Deb by everybody who's ever worked with you.
Yeah. So one of the best things about having an office in Gallup, this will bring back some memories for you. Senator John Pinto used to stop into our office nearly every single day, and he'd package food to take home to his wife and daughter. And it was always nice to see him in our office. He came by every day.
Yeah, Senator Pinto is one of the great stalwarts in New Mexico that we get to think about, and the legislature is not the same without him. But we did get a nice replacement with his granddaughter, Shannon, who's taking that on for him.
Exactly.
So you started out as an organizer, and then you've had a very rocketed career in getting to where you are today. But you've also had a lot of grounding things that got you here. And it's made, everybody knew that, you were one of the first Native American women to ever serve in Congress, especially from New Mexico. You were one of the first that did that. You're actually one of the first that has always been out there to be as Secretary of Interior, the first one in that role. So we've gone through a full arc, and all these things have shaped you, and they've delivered you to who you are. So what do you want to do as our next governor?
Right. Well, as you might know, we launched about a year ago, last February. And since that time, I've traveled across New Mexico several times. We've spoken to thousands and thousands of New Mexicans personally. The number one issue that people talk to me about is affordability.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to afford things, right?
Yeah.
New Mexicans need a raise. They need to make sure they have health care. All the cuts that Donald Trump is implementing for Medicaid and SNAP cuts, those will really adversely affect New Mexicans. So yeah, people are worried about their future. So affordability, I think we need to enhance the child tax credit and the working families tax credit. As I always say, New Mexicans need a raise everywhere. A public health care option, I think would also help New Mexicans. It would help small businesses to make sure that their employees have health care. I mean, there's so many ways that we can help each other and help our state. So, but putting more money in the pockets of New Mexicans, I think, is a way to help a large amount of people.
And that all comes from a place of, something that you and I share is the fact that your parents and my parents were veterans and them growing up. And can you share a little bit about that and what that meant to you growing up?
Yes, of course. Yes, my dad, this was my father's last duty station. He didn't he was a Marine, so he wasn't stationed at Kirtland, but his last duty station was the inspection and instruction station for the Marine Corps. So he was working to recruit, Marines here in Albuquerque. But we traveled a lot. I went to 13 public schools because of my dad's career. And, he was raising a family of 6, 4 of us kids, and him and my mom on an enlisted man's salary. So we learned early on how we needed to conserve lots of beans, fried potatoes, and tortillas for every dinner every night. It was that kind of thing. My mother knew how to stretch a dollar. And so I learned that early on. And when it was my turn to raise my kid as a single mom and money was scarce, right, I had learned all those lessons from my mom. So we did okay. And
I think you guys did really okay.
But the point being is I just know what it's like for so many New Mexicans.
And it's something that we as New Mexicans constantly, I don't know if we just downplay it all the time, but yeah, everybody that I've seen on campaigns and everything else, you talk about tortillas, beans, and potatoes, and their mouths all start to water. I think I was watching Ana Romero, who works for Senator Lujan just the other day, and she posted a photo of her eating potted meat on the campaign trail with the senators. So those staples in our diet are what brought us. But also the other big part that you're talking about is raising your daughter Soma. And you did such an amazing job with your daughter. I have to compliment you on that because I remember when she was in high school and we were organizing and she was at Albuquerque High and she was very vocal then and she was very adamant about, standing up for what was right. And that's the time, and she had to get that leadership from somewhere. And I truly, honestly believe that probably came from you. But at the same time, a lot of that had to drive what you do here in New Mexico. And I mean, it's not that you've never signed up for easy jobs. I mean, being party chair is not an easy job at all.
No, it wasn't. And a lot of people tried to talk me out of that.
Trust me, a lot of people try to talk me out of being in the Young Democrats too. But there was this call, right, that lived within us to give back to people.
Well, I just felt when I decided to run for state chair, I felt like I knew what our party needed. And it needed somebody who just really, really cared. And I'll be honest with you, it was a lot of fundraising and that kind of thing. But it was also, if the floor needed to be swept, I swept it. If the bathroom needed to be cleaned, I cleaned it. I wasn't like, it was whatever job needed to be done.
Yeah.
That's what I felt our party needed, somebody who was just willing to do whatever needed to be done. And that's what I did. And we were successful at it. We were, the 2016 election was terrible on the national level, but we did really well here in New Mexico, in spite of the fact that we had a Republican governor.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the work that we did there. And, it's like when you work from the ground up, because I started out as an organizer. When you work from the ground up, you learn a lot. And even now, when I'm running for governor and, take, for example, the pre-primary convention, it felt like old times, right?
Yeah, it does.
I was calling some of the same people that I called and relied on when I was chair of the party. And it was kind of like, they know me, and people had already organized with me for a long time. So I was grateful that those relationships were still vibrant, and I got the support I needed.
I think that's one of the reasons that you and I connected on OFA is that when I first got involved in this, I had a mentor that told me, why are you doing this? And I said, are you trying to do this to be somebody or to do something? And I remember I showed up to those offices in the early days looking just like this. And he said, don't you ever wear a suit in here again. I need you to mop the floors. And here he was, a state representative, mopping his own floors and throwing out the trash and those simple little things that help you don't think about on a campaign, but those are just as important as cutting the lists and organizing and
Absolutely.
having those titles.
Mm.
And I think I can remember a couple of times you and I were at the OFA building trying to get things cleaned up for the next day and tidied up so that when people came in, they saw that it was really nice. So that's something definitely. But you've shared, you started your own company as well. Can you tell us what made you start a small business?
Yeah, well, I didn't have childcare.
Yeah.
So I couldn't afford to pay for a babysitter for my child.
Yeah.
So Thelma was about 2, and I started I used to make this salsa and take it to family gatherings. And that if I went to a potluck, I'd say, yeah, I'll bring the salsa. And everyone loved it. And so that was the recipe that I decided to start processing. And so I started my own company. And I mean, look, you got to sell a lot of jars of salsa to make a lot of money. But it kept us afloat in a certain way. And so my child was 2 years old when I was hauling salsa around and delivering it to stores around New Mexico. And I have Soma in her car seat in the back, and we sang songs, and she learned the alphabet as we were driving around. So
And she learned how to spell chili with an E instead of an I. I mean, and all of those things it's interesting to tell those types of stories because then you become the first Native American cabinet secretary in U.S. history to lead in the Interior Department. And you talked about rebuilding the department and standing up on major projects like Sunzia. How are you going to use those experiences when you're governor?
Absolutely. So yes, when I got to the Department of the Interior, the morale was very, very low. The previous secretary had taken the BLM and moved it all the way across the country. They were during the Trump administration. These were, for example, they would take climate scientists who were studying climate change in Alaska and put them in an auditing office or something. Bright scientists who wanted to be out there, finding solutions to our biggest issues here in the country. And they would essentially reassign them so they wouldn't be able to do their jobs. So these were the oversight things that I saw when I was a member of Congress, and I got to grill, members of the Trump administration on the things they were doing, right? Building a wall and not consulting with the tribe whose land they, blasted apart. So I had a good idea of what the administration had been doing because I did oversight on them in the Natural Resources Committee. And so by the time I got to the department, it was evident that people weren't happy. It took a lot to rebuild the morale, but we were successful. And now it's really sad to see what they've done.
And you did such an amazing job as Secretary of the Interior.
Well, we were pleased, right? Land conservation, clean energy, tribes had a voice. We really worked hard to make sure that we were living up to the mission.
And you did do that. I mean, it's hard to be the first, right? It's always hard to be the first. And you led that with such dignity and such grace of fulfilling that role. And it was great to see so many of my family members, not only then, but when you got sworn in Congress, just literally inspired by where you were going. And the sense of community that you always felt. And you were also an activist for the missing, murdered, and indigenous peoples, and before you ever went to Congress. And that is a tough thing. That's a tough issue to crack the nut. But what was that like, and how did it build you up to work to shed light on the crisis in Congress and as secretary?
Absolutely. So yes, I mean, think about this: missing and murdered indigenous people have been happening for the past 500 years.
Yeah.
And so all over the country.
Mhm.
And I can remember, standing on a sidewalk with signs with, a half a dozen other people and trying to bring attention to this issue. And it's just a lot of people didn't know about it and they didn't care to know.
Mhm.
If 30 women could go missing from a community in a month and there'd barely be an article written about it. So by the time I got to Congress with 2 Native women there, myself and Congresswoman Sharice Davids, I held the first hearing at the House of Representatives. We had roundtable discussions. We passed legislation, Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act. These were, and we worked hard to make sure that in VAWA there was funding for violence against Native women in state court. So we did all those things, and with the idea that this is an issue that's been happening for hundreds of years. One or two pieces of legislation isn't going to remedy it. It would need consistent effort. So I feel like we made some inroads, and if I'm the next governor of New Mexico, then we're continuing. New Mexico is one of the states with the highest rate of missing and murdered Indigenous people, and we've read that in the news over the last many years. So it's an issue that still needs attention, and I'm going to give it the attention it needs and deserves.
And I mean, you have been, like I said, you've been on the forefront of this from day one, and you've been absolutely amazing for it. And I mean, and you're bringing it home, and you're bringing that message back here as a candidate for governor. But one of the biggest things that here in the state of New Mexico that we're constantly hearing from people, this is an organizer, and it hasn't changed because we heard it on the doors when we were knocking back in the day, is education in New Mexico. So what plans do you have for education here in the state?
Yes. Well, I want kids to read sooner.
Yeah.
Right? That we can't pass them into the next grade unless they're reading. And I know, third grade is kind of the line where we say kids need to read by third grade. If they could read sooner than that and feel really super confident about their reading skills, by the time they get to third grade, it would be wonderful. So we want reading coaches in classrooms. Teachers work with these kids every day, and so we'll listen to teachers more and help them direct us to the kids who need the one-on-one attention. I want to have an Every Child Outdoors initiative. I think every kid should learn outside. Our landscapes in New Mexico we're the land of enchantment, and we see that every day just walking outside. So I think that if we were able to give our children opportunities to learn outdoors, hiking on our trails, going to our acequias, camping out in the upper grades, that kids would be feel invigorated, right, to learn. And these are trips with their science teachers, their math teachers, their music teachers. However we can get them engaged, we need to inspire our kids.
Yeah.
And give them opportunities. So that's my goal. And I'll find every way I can to make sure they're inspired. We want to bring trades back to the schools in a big way too, because there's a lot of affordable homes to build, and a lot of clean energy to build. So that's going to take a workforce. And so I want our kids to have those opportunities when they graduate. Not every kid wants a 4-year college degree.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You and I probably remember that kind of shift happened in the 90s during the Clinton administration. They were trying to get us all into college, and that was great. But some of us probably should have taken a year off and taken time. I mean, I know I should have, most definitely. But my dad was in the trades, and that was, that's what put food on the table for us. And we saw that disappear over time. And you're talking about that is that, hopefully these kids will help us build up our communities. But the problem in our communities seems that like people just don't feel safe. And
they do not.
And so how do we make our communities safer for everybody that's here in New Mexico?
Right. Well, first of all, we need to make sure that our law enforcement has the tools they need, all the tools they need, all the technology they need, right? To get illegal drugs off our streets, to get violent criminals off our streets. I want to open an office of community safety it appears, and this is happening across the country, that police are called to issues that are not necessarily crimes. They're behavioral health issues. They're not trained for those things. They're not trained for those episodes that people experience. So we should have a way to distinguish what those calls are and ensure that we have behavioral health professionals to address people who are having those episodes, find them the help they need, help them get to a place where they can be helped. And so that the law enforcement can concentrate on what they're trained to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are, I mean, and those surrounding our families. And one of the biggest, and we see it all the time in the news here in New Mexico. It's unfortunate that we see so much of it is fixing CYFD, our Children, Youth, and Families Department. What are your plans on helping us?
Starting from scratch. We
Yeah.
gotta start it from scratch. We have to. We first of all get a qualified secretary in place. I want to move to the commission model because I think that will bring consistency to our kids. We need to immediately launch a robust program to recruit foster parents because they are very much needed right now too, and rebuild. As I said, when I became secretary, rebuilding the Department of the Interior, rebuilding the morale, making sure that the state workers who have been there, dedicated state workers, that they can, that we can build their morale and make sure that they feel appreciated and respected. Also, we need to really work hard initially to staff up because I believe very strongly that there are a lot of they're understaffed, and that also adds to the burden that leadership has in that area.
Madam Secretary, you and I have this shared story of that. There were times where we had $5 in our checking account, right? And we didn't know how we were going to be able to pay our rent and buy groceries in the same month. So many New Mexicans are having that. So what are your plans to making sure that New Mexicans have a little extra money in their pocket?
Right. As I mentioned, the child tax credit and the working families tax credit, we should enhance those two tax credits. When I was a single mom raising my kid, I took advantage of a tax credit when I filed my taxes, and it helped me tremendously. So I think that's a good plan. And look, New Mexicans do need a raise. How can we ensure that New Mexicans are making a living wage with benefits? The public option for health care, I think, will help New Mexicans across the state who are maybe losing their Medicaid, losing their SNAP benefits. All these things are intertwined.
Yeah.
Affordability is intertwined with healthcare, is intertwined with public safety, is intertwined with education. There's a large number of our children right here in New Mexico who aren't going to school and who aren't working.
Yeah.
We need opportunities for them. So bringing the trades back to our schools, as I mentioned, in a big way, starting in middle school, looking at career paths and hands-on training in high school, to paid apprenticeships when they graduate from high school. We need to graduate more kids from high school. We just need to, and look, we need to keep our kids here.
Yeah.
Our population's flat because a lot of our kids are leaving. I think that's one of the reasons. So I want to keep our kids here and build our economy. I'll also say that the universal child care, that is also an economic driver. That gives us an incentive to train more child care workers, to open more child care facilities. That's working toward, bringing our economy up. And so, we know of a Republican who's already sued the governor because of that.
Yeah.
He probably doesn't know what it's like for people like you and me, right?
Yeah.
And so I just feel like universal childcare would have changed my life. I opened my own business because I didn't have childcare. And if I had had childcare, it would have changed my life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's one of the amazing things that your last campaign, I haven't seen it used too much in this campaign, but in your congressional campaign, there were a lot of signs that said be fierce.
Mhm.
And you took on that moniker and you've held that with you through your entire career. You've always been a fierce advocate for families, a fierce advocate for children, a fierce advocate for people just getting a fair shot.
Mhm.
And you've also been a fierce opponent of the Trump administration, and you've never been afraid to shy away from that. And I know that you're always going to stand up to him because that's just who you've always been.
Mhm.
But one of the biggest fears in New Mexico is that um, that ICE will start coming into our communities, and we saw a little bit of that. We talked about it here in our show a little bit
Mhm, mhm,
early on.
mhm, mhm.
How are you going to address that as governor?
Right. Well, first of all, we should pass laws in New Mexico that say no law enforcement officer can operate in New Mexico unless they're transparent.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have any law enforcement officer in New Mexico with a mask on.
Yeah.
Without a name tag, which clearly states their name and what agency they work for. We can't have ICE coming into our communities, into our public schools, going into hospitals, trying to arrest people. There are people who are on their way, to walking into the door of the courthouse to attend a hearing that they're scheduled for, and they get nabbed by ICE. This is it's so wrong, and I am tired of them instilling fear in our communities. They were in southern New Mexico, harassing Native Americans for their citizenship papers. This is all very, it's Trump's way of instilling fear, and it needs to stop. If ICE wants to be in the state when I'm governor, they need to ask. They need to be transparent about what they're doing here, who they want to, who they're after. If the point of this whole exercise from Donald Trump is to arrest criminals, he's doing a terrible job.
Yeah.
So who do you want to arrest? Let me see your arrest warrant, right?
Yeah.
They shouldn't just be here willy-nilly, looking to harass people and instill fear in our communities.
And this thing just seems cyclical. I mean, I've shared my story in regards to that. When I was 13 years old, I worked with the immigrants because I had to help the family pay for their bills. But I was detained by ICE even in the early 90s.
Oh my God.
And they said, hey, see, and for the grace of God, a neighbor was driving by and ran to my parents' home and said, Cecil, told my dad, Guilford, they got your son and ICE is going to take him away. 13, I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have any form of identification. They didn't offer that to us as kids. We didn't have student IDs back then. And my father had to show up with a birth certificate, a social security card, and his ID to prove to people who I was. I was let go, but my friends who didn't have that and didn't have that sort of community had to go, were taken away. And my dad said, not just my son, but these other folks. You're that type of an advocate. You've always been that kind of
Yeah, that would make me really mad.
I've seen you when you're mad every day, and it's not nice.
Yeah.
Even with a party or when folks were going through those types of things, as we were dealing with door knockers, as they were going into certain parts of town where people didn't think because they looked like you and me that they weren't welcome there, and you and I had to have those conversations with a lot of people in our party about being sensitive to that issue and knowing what that's like. But Madam Secretary, you're gonna change the face of New Mexico. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And moving forward, if there's one parting thing that you would want people to know about why you're running for governor, what would that be?
Sure. Well, I believe a better New Mexico is possible.
Yeah.
Right. For all the reasons we talked about. Education, kids should read sooner. People should be able to access affordable health care, regardless of where they live. Everyone should be able to put a hot meal on their table and have a roof over their kids' heads, no matter where they live. And we just need to make sure that people feel safe in their communities.
Mm-hmm.
So every New Mexican deserves those things.
Yeah.
And so I feel that I'm the only candidate on either side of the aisle who's running for governor who has that experience. I've managed a department with 70,000 employees and an $18 billion annual budget. I did that for 4 years. I've passed laws when I was in Congress, and then I implemented them as Secretary of the Interior. So not only do I know how to oversee and manage a lot of people and a large budget, but I also know how the federal government works.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire because they have obligations to New Mexico.
Yeah.
We have 23 Indian tribes here. We have 2 national labs. We have military bases. We have veteran services, Indian Health Service. These are all things that the federal government is obligated to fund for New Mexico. And so I'm going to make sure that they do just that.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
taking time out of your day.
Thank you.
We wish you the best of luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That's our show for you today, and we'll be talking to you all very soon. See you next time.
Your go-to for hot takes and prickly debates.